Undocumented immigrants waited to board an ICE chartered jet in Mesa, Ariz, in 2015. This week, dozens of Somali citizens were on a flight to Somalia that made it only as far as Senegal before turning around. MooreGetty Images Ninetytwo Somali citizens were flown out of the United States under orders of deportation on Thursday, but their plane never made it to Somalia. The flight landed in the West African country of Senegal and, facing logistical problems, was rerouted back to the United States. It was an unexpected, 5,000-mile backtrack for the migrants, some of whom have lived in the United States for years, or even decades, while on a list for deportation because they had entered the country without proper documentation. In recent weeks, dozens of Somali citizens were transported from their homes in the United States. Many were living in Minnesota, to Louisiana in preparation for the flight. A few, with the help of lawyers, managed to secure stays of removal. The 92 on the plane got only as far as Senegal's capital, Dakar, according to United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In an emailed statement on Friday, the agency said it was notified that a relief flight crew was unable to get sufficient crew rest due to issues with their hotel in Dakar, so the aircraft and detainees spent time parked at the airport there. It added that various logistical options were explored, and ultimately ICE decided to reschedule the mission to Somalia and return to the United States with all 92 detainees. Civilians helping a man who was injured in a suicide car bomb explosion in Mogadishu, Somalia's capital, in October. Reuters war, famine and disease have killed hundreds of thousands of people in Somalia since the central government collapsed in 1991. Militants, including members of the Shabab, an Islamist terrorist group, are still carrying out deadly attacks in the Horn of Africa country. A pair of truck explosions killed hundreds of people on one of the busiest streets in Mogadishu, the capital, in October. It was the deadliest attack the city had experienced in decades. Kim Hunter, a lawyer whose firm represents two men who were on the flight, said it did not make sense to send her clients back to such a dangerous country. The security situation is abysmal, she said on Thursday. I, apparently, was naive because I actually believed that following the October 14 bombing, this flight might be suspended, Ms. Hunter learned on Friday that the flight had turned around and her clients' deportations had been rescheduled, though it was unclear for when. An ICE spokeswoman said the agency does not provide that information in advance. Ms. Hunter said she also had no advance notice when immigration officials recently transported 5 of her clients from their Minnesota homes. They were first taken to Louisiana to prepare for their deportation. Her law firm scrambled to secure stays of removal for the men and helped 3 avoid the flight. Now that the other 2 have had their deportations delayed, Ms. Hunter said she would keep working to prevent their removal. Neither client has a criminal record, and both have been in the United States for more than a decade. One is married to a permanent resident and has children who are United States citizens. We're inclined to think that this sort of failed flight reflects on the fact that more deportations are being carried out in haste and are perhaps not as well planned as they might have been previously, she added. One Somali woman in Minnesota, who did not want to give her name for fear of getting her family in trouble with the authorities, said in a phone interview on Friday that her cousin was among those on the flight. She said she had been desperate for answers since Wednesday, when her cousin called from Louisiana saying he was about to be deported. I was very sad. I cried, and he told me not to make him cry, she said, adding that it would be dangerous for him to land in Mogadishu because he had no connections there. He hasn't seen Somalia for the last 20 years. Many Somali citizens who are in the United States without documentation have been able to stay for years despite deportation orders because Somalia would not grant them the necessary travel documents. Mogadishu, which opened an embassy in Washington in 2015, appears to be cooperating with American officials to accept more of its citizens back. The number of Somali people being deported from the United States has risen since 2014. During that fiscal year, 65 Somali citizens were removed from the United States. That number jumped to 120 the next year, and 198 the year after that. In the fiscal year 2017, 521 Somali citizens were deported, according to the most recent report from ICE. A spokeswoman for the agency said there were 5 chartered flights to Somalia that year.